As 2020 winds down and you're working on your plans for 2021, how are you planning to raise your profile and attract more of your ideal clients? You have no doubt seen the power of video. When you stop scrolling to watch on social media, when you see videos on websites, and if you're one of the 2 billion monthly users on YouTube. Video is one of the most effective mediums for building trust and credibility and attracting your ideal clients. And while video has long been important, it's even more so now, as everyone continues to adjust to this virtual world and building a valuable virtual brand. Whether you're a current business owner, thinking of going out on your own, want to build your personal brand, or simply be more comfortable and confident in this virtual world, sign up now for a brand new 3-month program that I'm launching with my colleague in the UK, Adam Owen. It kicks off on the 1st of February, so you can enjoy the holidays and get settled after the new year. But register now because we are ending this year with some goodness and giving you 20% off for the rest of 2020. Full details and registration at innovatingadvice.com/ideal clients.
Our industry is quite, not everyone, but can be quite traditional, and it's quite focused on the written word. We're not necessarily that great with visuals and making things quite fun and interesting. Finance is perceived to be quite dull and boring. I think it's probably a failure to an extent on our part as professionals that we've not made it more interesting and more engaging for people. So that's something I've always sort of thought about as I've come through.
Welcome to episode 75 of the Innovating Advice Show, featuring the first guest from Scotland, Keith Boys. Being the first guest, we chat a little bit about Scotland, and I bet you'll be surprised by what their national animal is. Keith is the founder of Spentwell, which he launched in August 2019, after spending 10 months talking with and learning from other firms, and focusing heavily on what has become a multi-award-winning brand. Keith walks us through his journey, what he's outsourcing and why, and the team he's built and what team means to him. Links and transcript at innovatingadvice.com or directly through the link below. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hello, Keith, the first guest from Scotland. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you very much, Kate. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so thrilled to have someone from another new country that we haven't yet visited. So since it's been a while, whenever we have the first person from a country, we chat a little about the country, and we'll talk about the advice market and kind of what's going on there. But let's talk about some fun stuff first. And, I've been to Scotland, I've been to Edinburgh, which is just a beautiful, beautiful place. And as I was looking up Scotland, I always like to learn a little more. Everything I was reading just kept talking about how the Scots are a nation of innovators. I was like, well, how perfect is that? But I was shocked. It was like, you guys are credited for like the television and the telephone and the steam engine and anesthesia and penicillin and the pedal bicycle and the decimal point of all things.
Yeah, I'm sure some people may dispute some of those things, but yeah, we are quite well known for our inventions over the years, which is... we've got quite a proud history, I think, which is quite cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. And of course, I think everyone, when they think of Scotland, they think certainly of Scotch, but also of Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. So what are your thoughts on Nessie, Keith?
Well, I have never seen the Loch Ness Monster, not yet anyway. But there's no shortage of sightings sort of year by year. So whether it exists or not, I'm not sure, but always fun to believe in these myths, so why not? And it brings lots of tourists to Scotland, so I would say it's a big plus there anyway.
Yeah, it certainly does. That does the Scotch wood. Maybe the mountains, not so much. You and I were joking before that your highest mountain, Ben Nevis, is not that high.
okay, after we caught up, I actually looked at this. So in comparison, so Ben Nevis is 1,345 meters high, which, now correct me if I'm wrong, but is about a third of the size of Charleston Peak, is it, which is near you guys, which is about 3,500 or 3,600 meters. So, it's essentially just a little mound compared to what you guys have, but the biggest in Scotland. The biggest in Scotland. So it's a good few hours hike up, which is a lovely yomp. And as you said, we're well known for whiskey. So I think there must be well over 100 distilleries in Scotland. So you can do some quite fun tours around Scotland, stopping off at the distilleries. We did a tour ourselves a few months ago, but unfortunately the distilleries were closed because of COVID, so it was more sober than planned, but we'll need to revisit that at some point. But it is a bit of a cliche that Scots drink whiskey, because I've not quite got into it yet, so maybe I'm a poor Scotsman. And it was something that came a lot when I was living abroad, that as soon as I said I was from Scotland, the assumption was that I must drink lots of whiskey, which is not necessarily true.
That's too funny. So I actually am a huge fan of whiskey, and I have been for a while. I don't honestly know where it started, but as soon as I think about like Scotland, if you have watched Parks and Recreation, Ron Swanson and his just obsession with Lagavulin, which is just super cool. I was like, that seems like that should be on my bucket list as a place to go.
Cool. I've not seen that actually. I need to have a look.
Oh, it's so good. It's just a great series, and yeah, he loves his steak and whiskey. And I'll say the last thing about Scotland that I think is interesting: your official animal.
Yeah, the unicorn, which is probably quite surprising. I would actually suspect not many Scottish people realise that the unicorns are our national animal, but I think it represented nobility back in the day. So even on the sort of UK crest, you will see the unicorn, and then sort of England, the sort of the lion as well. So yeah, quite interesting. But I guess a unicorn is very sort of noble and sort of denotes respect and prestige, I guess. I think that's why it's on it. But it's on a lot of our coats of arms here in Scotland, which would represent Scottish clans back in the day, and you still see them now. So yeah, it's quite interesting, that actually.
I mean, I think that's kind of wild. And I read that, and I had to go look up like 3 different sources, because I was like, is it true that the unicorn is the national official animal of Scotland? That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, it's not what you'd expect. I guess it ties in with those mythical creatures we seem to like, a bit like the Loch Ness Monster.
Hey, you don't know that Nessie's mystical. She could be real.
Very true. We've just not found her yet.
Not yet. Well, you haven't, Keith, but I think other people have.
Yeah, she's playing an epic game of hide and seek.
That's pretty awesome. All right, so let's shift our attention to what does the advice and planning market look like in Scotland?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think here in Scotland, and I guess certainly in Edinburgh, which is where I'm based, which is our capital, the advice market's very traditional. So, looking back, it's certainly changing now, but there's quite a focus on sort of investment management and traditionally stockbroking, particularly here in Edinburgh, and that's something that's been sort of carried through over the decades. So we're seeing an interesting transition now where there's a lot of big investment firms, and they would be led on that front rather than financial planning. But there's now a lot of these guys starting to do this awkward transition and flipping it round, and they're realizing that, actually financial planning is pretty important, and actually we can lead with that and add a lot of value. And the investment management stuff, well, it's still important, but it's maybe not as all-encompassing, as the sort of financial planning side of it is. So we're seeing sort of an interesting shift, but I would still say we're behind the curve here in Scotland on that front. It is still quite traditional, but that said, there are a lot of really good firms, good financial planning and investment firms doing some great stuff. So it's important to point that out. But I would say overall, it's particularly in Edinburgh, it's quite traditional, which we're trying to break here, of course.
You especially, you're leading the pack there.
Yeah.
So talk us through then your journey in the profession.
Yeah, so I suppose like many, I fell into the industry. I actually studied sports management of all things at university,
Wow.
and quickly came to the realization that whilst I enjoyed sport and found it quite interesting, I didn't see it as a career as such. It was more of a hobby. And the financial area is an area that had always interested me, but I didn't quite know where I'd land, or business, or what I would do. So I actually started off in pension premium processing back in the great financial crash of 2008, which was an interesting start.
Repeat that.
Pension premium processing. So, Kate, if you were contributing to a pension, I'd be the guy with the black screen and the green writing, the very sort of retro computers. I'd be the guy inputting your contribution into the computer for that to then register, and so on. I went with sort of hundreds and thousands of employees. So that was an interesting start
like
to the world
technology
of pensions.
was being leveraged. We're not talking about 1978 here.
No, not at all. That was 2008. So that was an interesting start. So I could have easily walked away, I think, but I found it interesting enough, and at that point I was exposed to the certificate in financial planning, which is now the diploma in financial planning, and thought, oh, this is quite interesting. I could actually see taking this forward, and I'd always wanted a career where I could challenge myself, something that interested me, but I also wanted to make a difference, and I didn't know what that was. And I could suddenly see that opportunity in financial planning where I could challenge myself on the technical side, but actually add a lot of value and help people and support them on their journey, personally and financially. So that took me on from there, it took me on a 6-year journey of study to get to chartered financial planner stage. Wow. So around 17, 18 exams, I think I did in total over that period. And through that, I'm one of those advisors that rather than stepping straight into the advising world, I've worked my way through, starting from that pension administration work and sort of working my way through back office into paraplanning, which is interesting as well. Starting to see a bit more of the advice side, and then doing a hybrid role, and then eventually stepping into fully fledged advising. So, and that was quite deliberate because I'd always wanted to understand that journey. So eventually, when I did get to the point where I was sitting in front of clients, I could set expectations because I understand what goes on in behind the scenes, rather than perhaps being the advisor that promises a lot without really understanding.
That's a good point of it. I always think about that. Sometimes, actually, my first job was at Target, and I was just a cashier at Target as soon as I turned 16. And being, at the sort of lowest entry, and it's a massive, massive corporation, I just kept thinking the way some of the inefficiencies were done and just understanding, some of the little things about it, I kept wondering, like, are the people higher up, have they been down here at the beginning stage, or do they ever come back and revisit it? Because there is so much value to understand, okay, how does the back end work? How does the entry level stuff work? Like, it all comes together to form the brand and the experience, and just how everything runs, both internally with the business and just what the client gets out of it. So that's great to actually say, hey, no, I'm going to make sure I go through that whole process.
Yeah, 100%, Kate. And what you've said ties in quite nicely with, sort of my thinking around, coming into the industry. I think having sort of gone on that journey, I could sort of see a lot of good things, which was great, and it kept me interested in the industry. But I could also see things that I wanted to do a bit differently. Yeah. Because our industry is quite, not everyone, but can be quite traditional, and it's quite focused on the written word. We're not necessarily that great with visuals and making things quite fun and interesting. Finance is perceived to be quite dull and boring. I think it's probably a failure to an extent on our part as professionals that we've not made it more interesting and more engaging for people. So that's something I've always sort of thought about as I've come through. There's a simple example of, recall with one of the firms I was working with where, I suggested, how about we take this big chunk of text, remove it, and put in this great visual that a client can
Yes.
really engage with.
Yeah.
And again, not everyone's a visual person, but and compliance just said no.
Oh,
Even though it would generate the same outcome for the client, they said no. It needs to be written like this, and so little things like that, which made me think there's an opportunity to do things differently here and make it more engaging for the client. And that's the important thing: make it more engaging and interesting for the client, and bring them on board.
oh, absolutely. And just let the public understand more that it isn't all just manually entering data in old school computers, and letting other people know that it can be a lot more fun and interesting. And you mentioned that it was compliance that said you can't do that. But the thing that I always find interesting, and that's such an important piece, is, I talk to so many advisors that are in these big companies and are like, well, we can't do that because of compliance. And it's like, that's the great thing about going out on your own or joining a small boutique practice, is they're agile and there's so much more flexibility. And yes, of course there's compliance and there's regulation,
Yeah,
but it's not at this burdensome level that actually, I think prevents companies from innovating. And it's not, that's a general statement. Not all compliance people are like that, but I see that a lot. So good for you, kind of looking around and going, is that the right thing? Is that really necessary?
yeah,
I think we'd have a better outcome, making this slight change.
yeah. And you're totally right, because I think compliance is an important function, and it's important to highlight that. But we should be flexible enough where we need to remind ourselves that who are we doing this for?
Yeah.
We're doing it for the client or the family we serve. We're not doing it for the regular. Yes, we need to stay within certain rules and get the technical points right, but we need to deliver in a way that can be deciphered by these people, not just sitting there bamboozled with endless streams of jargon.
Yeah. And that's one of your things. You are not a fan of jargon.
No, I do not. I'm not a fan of jargon. I think I think it's something I found a little bit baffling sort of throughout my time in financial services, and I've actually, in all honesty, an admission here, I've fallen asleep in a meeting before as a young
Keith, haven't we all?
yeah, as a young paraplanner, where I was sitting listening to a pension presentation, and I remember dozing off and then sort of panicking and waking back up. A brief micro nap, I'm sure. I
Yeah.
hope
Yeah.
that no one seemed to notice. And I remember sitting there thinking, oh God, am I in the wrong industry? Do I actually not enjoy this? And then I stepped away from it and thought, well, actually, no, I actually find the topic interesting. It's just the way it's being delivered, and it can be
Yeah.
delivered in a far more fun and engaging way. And so the jargon, in my opinion, I get why there is a need for some jargon at times, but I think to a degree it's laziness where we do use jargon. Why can't we use great visuals and talk about bubbles or chocolate or sweets or something, and tie it in with investments? If you see some of the videos I've done, it
Yes.
takes some of these topics, or I certainly try to. And the challenge is actually, can I talk for a minute or 30 seconds about a subject like pensions without using any of that jargon, and use it, talk about things that people use in their day-to-day life. And that could be, nachos and cheese on that sign, or it could be, a box of Quality Street to explain what pension wrapper is, or, things like that, where people can look at and nod their head. Yeah, I know what those things are. Oh, right. Oh, right. That's how that works. Right. Yeah, I get that. Rather than sitting there talking about, giving you the 101 of pensions legislation. Who cares?
Yeah.
No one cares about that.
Not a lot of people. Well, and it's not only fun and eliminating jargon, but it's relatable, which is huge. And perhaps even more than that, it's memorable. Like people are and they're gonna remember that for the right reasons, not for the meeting they fell asleep in. They're gonna remember for, hey, remember he was talking about that chocolate wrapper? And like, what does our chocolate wrapper look like? Right? Like that creates an entirely different conversation and experience.
Yeah, completely. And I think, and it's when clients then sit there and say, I understand that.
Yeah.
And then you can sit there and think, brilliant. It's been delivered in the way it should, because actually one of my fondest memories is an elderly lady I did some work with. And I did some visuals with her and some drawings on the page to explain her current situation and what we do for her. And she said at the end of the conversation, Keith, this is the first time that anyone's ever explained this to me like this. And I understand, or I think I understand what you're saying. And I politely asked her to repeat what we were talking about. And she nailed it, because we talked in her language rather than our industry language. And that's something that still sticks with me to this day, that moment with her. And that's something that I sort of carry forward. So I'm not perfect and I'll slip into jargon, but I think it's something that's important to me, and I think it seems to be resonating with clients, that approach, keeping things as simple as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And Keith, you do amazing videos. I do love that chocolate one. We'll still get you here to Vegas at some point in front of the amazing chocolate fountains at the Bellagio. But they're great. And one of your big things when you started Spentwell is around branding and creating a totally different look and feel for what financial planning is. So, you spent 10 months on branding pre-launch. I mean, that's pretty full on. What did that all entail?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting journey. So when I decided to take the plunge, and this a real decision was I could see an opportunity to do something a bit different, or make financial planning more engaging, and sort of pull it forward into my vision. So we spent about 10 months pulling that together. I did a lot of background research. I spoke to a lot of firms in London, as well as up here in Scotland. So I spoke to probably around a dozen firms actually when I total them all up, and listened to their different approaches and how they were going about it, and also talked about what I was thinking about and how it could be delivered. And through all of that, sort of pulled together my own streamlined approach. And then we went on this sort of journey with the sort of branding and design, which was fascinating. And it's something I'd always said that was hugely important. I think we need to get the brand. I'm willing to spend money on the brand because I think it's hugely important here. I think there's a lot of good financial planning brands out there. I just think if we do this right, we can stand out in what is quite a crowded marketplace. And what we found when we did our research, and this was with Studio LR, who are branding and design company, fantastic, and they didn't have any experience really in this field. They dealt with sort of retail and public services and so on. I thought, brilliant. I don't want them to have any knowledge of financial services. I need a fresh look on this.
Oh, nice.
So they came in. We did our sort of broader research, and what we found is when we pulled out all these different firms, is there's quite common themes. And one of the common themes was the colour schemes firms use. And what we found was, and they put this all up on the wall, all these different firms, common colours were some form of navy or royal blue, white, and gold, three common sort of colour schemes. And you see this across the industry. And I'm sure you can think of some off the top of your head. There's nothing wrong with that. Those colours generate some form of sort of prestige, honour and so on. But we didn't want to be like the pack. And the other part of it we sort of discovered was the typical imagery. So it would be the couple, walking along the beach, or the family playing with the dog, and these are up in a balloon somewhere. Typical imagery which you see sort of time and time again in the industry. And I thought, well, I get it. I can see why you've used it, but can we do something a bit different there? Let's talk about more day-to-day things that people do and find interesting, which is why you see nachos and cheese behind me. Or there'll be images of people skiing down a hill. So all the images we use are actually based on, it's kind of taking boring and make it interesting. So they're all actually based on financial charts. So a pie chart or a line graph, and then we've made it visual. So that'd be a pie chart there, and made it quite interesting. So there's other visuals where we talk about smartphone paparazzi as an example. It sounds bizarre, but it's just things in day-to-day life that will resonate with people, and it makes the whole sort of look and feel of the brand that bit more interesting. And a key part of that was also making it approachable. So pink was never, the sort of soft pink was never, I didn't start with that idea in mind, but we sort of pulled it together. I thought actually it works because it's soft, it's approachable. Financial planning to me can seem in investment management, it can almost appear as if the advisor's up here on the mountaintop
Yep.
and the client's down below looking up, sort of wondering what's going on and confused. And I really wanted to level up the conversation and make it more collaborative. And I believe we do that with the sort of colour schemes, which is meant to be more soft and approachable. And when we deliver advice and sit down with people, it is in a more relaxed environment. So right now it's over Zoom, but we'll do it over a coffee, and it will be open collar. You won't see me in a suit or tie, which for me could create a bit of a disconnect. And I want to be more sort of relatable and relaxed with clients. And I think when you get them more relaxed, they start to open up. So I've maybe waffled on here, but hopefully that gives you sort of an idea of the journey we've got on with the brand and design. And actually through that, we've won 4 awards now, I think, for our brand and design, which is just a lovely thing to happen. Very unexpected, but we're very, very proud of that. I'm not sure how often it is a financial planning firm wins these sorts of awards, but it's been quite a special year in that respect.
Yeah, I don't think it happens too terribly often, but it's so well deserved. And I love that you went for a firm that didn't have experience in financial services. Like, that just speaks so highly to the value of a fresh perspective. And a conversation I've been having a bit lately is, people have been asking, hey, I'm looking at having an operations person join, or someone to do, more back office stuff, maybe move into a paraplanner role. And, certainly when you get in the paraplanner role, you need specific training and whatnot. But recently I had Stacey McKinnon, the chief operating officer at Morton Capital, on the show. And she was talking about just like flipping it all on its head, and how she goes out and finds people that, work in retail or restaurants or service industries. She actually got the job after being a Pilates manager, and the owner of the company saw the value in having someone that actually isn't familiar with financial services, like who can bring a totally fresh perspective to how we, find, hire, and develop people in our company.
Yeah, okay, I listened to that and I thought that was fantastic. I thought it was so interesting. It sort of chimes with taking the sort of best bits of other industries and pulling it into our industry. Why can't we do that more often? I thought that was a really interesting podcast. Brilliant.
And well, thanks. And that's all credit to her. But that's exactly what you did with branding. And so during those 10 months, and you mentioned talking to all these other firms, so had you already left your prior job and this was part of your, initial steps before launch, you built that into your plan?
Yeah. So I'd left I tied things up at the end of the year, and I had my sort of 3 or 4 month waiver period, but during that whole period, I was busy working on the new firm to sort of pull it together, which is quite daunting because you're starting from. It's quite exciting in many ways because you're starting from scratch, but at the same time, you're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
So you don't really know where do you start. So I'm hugely in debt. Although I've started this firm, I'm hugely in debt to all the people that supported me. Some fantastic guys down in London giving me their time. Guys like Alan Smith, who's quite well known down there. He was fantastic and really knowledgeable. Some fantastic guys up here as well. And I've got a mentor up in Edinburgh who's been hugely supportive. And I think that's what's nice about our industry. What's lovely about it is people are willing to support you. Yeah. Even if you're just a young guy like me starting off, they're willing to share their knowledge, which is, I wouldn't be where I am today without all the support I have around me, that's for sure.
So did you just cold reach out to some of these people? Were they all introductions or people that you had previously known?
Yeah, it was a mix. So I'd reached out speculative to a few people, and I was kindly supported through some of the guys at New Model Advisor, the trade press here in the UK, and they introduced me to a few guys, and I knew quite a few guys up here in Scotland as well, and a couple of introductions through other advisors. So, and I was just blown away by people willing to give me an hour of their time, which to them, well, I'm sure it was quite a lot of their time, and to me that was far too much. So it was brilliant, and all that helped me take all the scatter here and noise and sort of bring it down into a more sort of focused and streamlined approach.
So you just have to ask. I mean, that's kind of an important No, it's just reach around and ask. And I have people reach out to me all the time. And I love talking to people that are in university or just coming out and kind of just saying, what are the different options out there? It is a profession where a lot of people, a lot of wonderful people are willing to give their time to help, either people new to the profession or looking at doing something new like you were.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's easy to see other advisors and firms as competition, but what I found in our industry is that it's so collaborative. Particularly when you take communities like Next Gen community or XY
Yeah.
community, people are just so willing to share knowledge and make the profession better. And I think that's the way it should be. It's fantastic. And here in the UK, there's, I think, a third of advisors retire in the next 10, 12 years,
Wow.
according to one publication. So, there's an abundance of opportunities there. So why can't we work together to create a stronger industry? It's, a no-brainer in many ways.
Right. So some of the things that I anticipate you learn from them, you actually outsource some of your things. Compliance, we chatted about that earlier. You outsource compliance, which is probably a very, very smart move. And investment management. I mean, were those recommendations from those meetings you did?
Yes, that is something I thought about, and quite a few of the firms I'd spoken to were also sort of using that approach quite well. I know there's an advisory practice over your way in the US where I think he manages something like £1 billion and he's outsourced everything, which is
wow,
beyond my understanding. But I think it demonstrates the power of outsourcing. And I've always sort of lived by the motto: I'm keen football man or soccer to you guys. And Sir Alex Ferguson was quite a big sort of proponent of this, where if you're not an expert in this field yourself, make sure you've got people around you that are.
Yes.
So I see myself as an expert in delivering financial advice, and I dabble with the marketing side and the videos and blogs and all of that, which is interesting. But I would never consider myself a compliance expert. I know it falls on my shoulders, but I knew I needed extra support. So it made sense to get on board an outsourced firm there who could support me. And I don't have I'm not at the point where I can take on staff. So outsourcing it was the perfect route. And similarly with the investment management approach. So we've engaged with Finalytics, so Abraham Okasani and the team, who have been fantastic. And we did a lot of research into all the different firms and landed on them for their, and actually chime out with our approach here because it's simple, they hate jargon, and they want to deliver a lot of value for clients. Nice. And Abraham himself is quite a character. But again, that was about looking at, could I sit down with a client and say, I've looked at all the market, I know these are the best 10 funds out there. And I sat down and thought about this because I toyed with different approaches and decided I couldn't do it. I couldn't, and I wouldn't have the time to be able to do that broad research. So I needed additional support. So again, that was part of the reasoning, and I knew sort of combining those compliance support, investment support, it would deliver what I want, which is a lot of value for clients. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the outsourced approach, and it allows me, which is the most important thing, to sit in front of clients.
Yeah.
So whilst I do all the marketing for the firm right now, at some point I may outsource that. Although I do quite enjoy that, but
I would say hopefully not those videos. That's a huge piece, and that's part of building your brand and raising your profile.
Yeah. There's definitely a balance there. I'm sure I'll still take the lead, but anything that helps with the efficiency of the firm and keeps me in front of clients and delivering a strong service for them, I'm all for. And that's just all part of having that strong team around me. And the other sort of outsource I have is my own sort of mentor, who I outsource counselling to an extent, I guess. I think it's good to have other experts in the industry who can challenge you. So I've got a mentor, and I'm part of a smaller group of advisors who've been fantastic as well, where you can ask the daft questions. Because I think there's a fear, and actually I had this fear as a young advisor coming into the industry, the fear to ask what would be perceived as daft questions, which you presume everyone knows, but probably everyone's sitting there wondering the same thing. So I've just got to the point where I'll just ask, and I'm okay looking the fool, because at least then I know.
Yeah, And that's, I mean, you're not going to know unless you do ask. And I remember that back in elementary school, I used to think the same thing. I was like, am I the only one that doesn't understand what's going on? And as a kid, I actually was shy in class sometimes. I don't think I'm too shy anymore, but then there were a few times I raised my hand and, a bunch of other people were like, I had the same question. And so I feel like I learned early on, I was like, we just have to ask. And, if people do look over and they're like, well, that was a dumb question, that's on them, not on you. So good.
Yeah, 100%.
Good for you asking.
Thank you.
And you mentioned a minute ago, like a third of advisors retiring in the next number of years, which is a huge number. And one of the challenges that a lot of those firms have, especially when they're, solo shops, is not having a succession plan and not actually having something in place. And so even if something happened to the advisor, even if it wasn't heading into retirement, what then happens to those clients? And so you have already started taking care of that with what do you call it, a fallback advisor?
Yeah, so it's an interesting point. And actually, it's a big challenge for advisors, the sort of succession planning, because there's no shortage of client books out there which you could buy, because there's many, as I said, there's a lot of advisors coming up for retirement. So yes, so I've got a fallback option. So I do have a backup advisor who would step in. Predominantly if I wasn't able to do the job, so if something was to happen to me, if I was critically ill, as an example,
Yeah.
I've got the peace of mind of knowing that someone would step into the firm and take over the reins, which is hugely important, and it's important for clients to know that they do have that backup as well, because it is a risk you take as a solo advisor. You do need to think about these sort of support options behind the scenes. And then, longer term, I think it's something I'm still giving thought to, succession planning. But I do love the thought that, there's some fantastic firms who are doing, some great succession planning where they're passing it on to their staff and spreading it across using using a couple of clever mechanisms. So,
Yeah.
If I take on staff, if that's something that does come on the horizon, I love the idea of sort of passing on to the next generation, who hopefully I've sort of brought up, with similar viewpoints and similar approaches, with sort of, quite simplified approach. That'd be quite interesting, but that's for future Keith to worry about. I think right now I'm just over a year in, so we just did our State of the Nation review back in August, which is crazy to think it's been a year.
Awesome.
Gone by. So we set ourselves targets for the next couple of years. And then our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is our 10-year target as well, which is, I think you can have a bit of fun with these things, because it might seem outlandish, but it's something we'd like to strive for. So our target there is, we're not, funds under management is not something we really badge ourselves on, but it's to have 100 client families under Spentwell. That would be our sort of 10-year goal. And what that looks like in terms of profitability and funds under management and things, it's not really a driver, but it's having a positive impact on 100 families that can need and value our services. That's what we want to get to at that point. So yeah,
nice and focused. And you keep saying we, so who all consists in the we?
So I've got I've got a fellow director. So I've got she's not an advisor, but she's very experienced in business. And has actually supported other entrepreneurs in various guises. So she offers me wisdom from running a business perspective. I do also have a corporate secretary who sort of helps me running the limited company. And then I consider those outsourced to the investment guys and compliance guys, my mentors and things. They're all part of the team as well. My wife's part of the team, because she gives me. She picks me up when I'm feeling down and celebrates the wins with me and things. So,
awesome.
As do many of my friends and family. So when I say we, although it may be just me and my fellow director, I feel like I've got a team of 30 people around me.
And you involve them in these decisions, and that's so cool. And I think that's a great lesson, because starting a business by yourself can be so tough and so lonely, and no amazing business in the history of the world has ever been built by just one person. Even if it's one face, it's always had a team behind it. So it sounds like you're really acknowledging the value that every person on that team provides, and that it is a team, even if it's not, officially all under one umbrella, it's all going with the same vision and mission.
Yeah, 100%. And Kate, you'd be considered part of that team as well, because I listen to your podcast and I've taken a lot of wisdom from your podcast. And similarly with guys like Andy Hart, his podcast, Pete Matthews, these sorts of guys, as well as I'm just looking at my bookshelf there, guys like Nick Murray, Seth Godin, Ryan Holiday, these sorts of guys.
Yeah.
It seems odd to say, but you guys are all part of my team as well, even though you don't know it.
I love that.
Yeah, you all contribute to, you make me think about things more deeply and help me discover things that I didn't know existed. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Massive part of the team. So thank you.
Well, and thank you, Keith, for thinking about things differently, for doing things differently, for taking those 10 months. I mean, that's a big investment, time, financially, emotionally, the decisions of, coming up with the name and the branding and the colors. And that's something that not everyone does. So you've inspired me to even take a look at, my brand. And I did not put I didn't even put 10 weeks. I didn't put 10 days into it. So you've made me think about things differently. So Keith, you are also part of my team, and your videos inspire me, and they're fantastic. And I'm so thrilled that we got to finally have you on the podcast.
Thank you. That's very kind. I appreciate being on.
Any final thoughts?
Oh, any final thoughts? I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to have this conversation with you, Kate, in 10 years' time to see if I made it to my big, hairy, audacious goal. But I think, regardless, and for any other advisors listening, I wouldn't change this. I think starting up my own firm is the best decision I ever made, because it lets me deliver finance in a fun and accessible way, and it lets me have an impact in people's lives. And I think that's just something that's a huge honor, to be honest. And it's a fantastic industry to be part of. So I'm loving the journey. I wouldn't change it. And yeah, here's to the next, many years and the roller coaster ride that'll come.
Amazing. And how about, I was going to say, we'll definitely do a check-in in 5 years, but maybe every year or two, because honestly, the amount of stuff that can happen in a year is incredible. So I look forward to continuing to see your journey, staying in touch, watching you grow, and continuing to inspire planners, not only there in Edinburgh, but all over the world.
Thank you, Kate. I love that. Thank you. I appreciate being on.
Awesome. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. If you're wondering where to start, head to innovatingadvice.com/start for a short video series walking you through 3 steps to identify opportunities for innovation in your financial advice or financial planning business. Again, that's innovatingadvice.com/start.